Well, hello, we are back. So hello to our Peloton Aérogramme subscribers, bonjour to readers of LaCourseOnTête.com, and a big socially distanced high five to Jeremy Whittle. And Jeremy, why should I be so excited about the Spring Classics? Why?
Because quite frankly, OJ, from the Italian Riviera to the cobbles of northern France and Flanders, everything's on the line. In the one-day classics, it's shit or bust.
I love this. Welcome to La Course on Tête.
My name's Jeremy Whittle. I'm currently in Sussex in the south of England in my pied-à-terre in Brighton.
I'm Sophie Smith. I'm a cycling journalist, currently based in Melbourne, Australia, surrounded by moving boxes, nowhere near as glamorous as jazz.
I'm Peter Cossins. I'm in Foix in the French Pyrenees. It's snowing outside. I'm just come back from Paris-Nice.
Ooh. And I'm OJ Borg, currently in a windowless studio on the Salford Riviera. And welcome to a new season of podcasts from La Course on Tête, focusing on the forthcoming spring racing programme, which we're all very excited. On this first episode of 2021, we'll preview Milan-San Remo, and who'll tame this most savage of beasts. We'll try and fathom which gypsy Primož Roglič has crossed as he suffers more bad luck. And we'll have to talk Dick. And by Dick, I mean Richard, and by Richard, I mean Dr. Richard Freeman, a possible doping case that has taken so long that most of us have forgotten what was going on. But first, a word from our presenting sponsor, as the Spring Classics are back, and Flow Bikes has you covered. Watch the Tour of Flanders, Ghent-Wevelgem, Amstel Gold, and more live and on demand in the United States, Canada, and Australia. Plus, go inside the race with athlete interviews, in-depth course previews, expert analysis, and other exclusive content. The cobbles, they are calling, so don't miss out. Subscribe now at flowbikes.com/aerogram. That's flobikes.com/aerogram. And when you purchase a Flowbike subscription, you'll get access to the entire Flow Sports network of over 25 sports. Don't miss out. Sign up at flowbikes.com/aerogram. That's flobikes.com/aerogram. So, Pete, what race are we all most excited about?
Which of the Spring Classics? I would have to say the Tour of Flanders. I think that's always my favourite classic for all kinds of reasons. And this year it's going to be an absolute corker because we've got Mathieu van der Poel, Julian Alaphilippe, Wout van Aert, and a cast of many others that are going to really light it up this year, I think.
For me, I count Milan-San Remo as a classic, so it'll be Milan-San Remo and also Paris-Roubaix.
I think, I always get very excited about Milan-San Remo, partly because I just love that the scenery and the landscape. And I also really, really love the kind of last 15 nerve-jangling minutes of that race. And then I'm not quite so keen on cobbles. I mean, I think they're spectacular, but Paris-Roubaix will be special this year because obviously there's a women's race being added to the Paris-Roubaix weekend, which will be very exciting to see.
I think I have to agree, Jeremy. For me, it's all about Paris-Roubaix. I love Paris-Roubaix. I love the brutality. I love the fact it's hard when it's wet and it's worse when it's dry. And I love the fact that there is a women's episode this year. And I think it's made even more exciting by the fact that there wasn't any Paris-Roubaix action last year.
Worse when it's dry.
Well, it is. That's what I get told. I did a whole thing with Rob Hales once there, and he said because when it's dry, I mean, he told me a story the last time he raced it, someone fell off and broke their femur, which put me off riding a cobble ever. But he said, yeah, when it's dry, you just get choked by the dust.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, all the journalists want a wet Paris-Roubaix because we haven't had a really, really wet Paris-Roubaix for a long, long time. I can't remember, Pete. Perhaps you can when the last one was, and the photographers certainly do because the pictures they get are great. But yeah, I kind of think it should be wet. It should be wet and muddy to me.
Have you ever tried riding the cobbles?
I think Jeremy's done this, yeah.
I have done. I have the worst cycling experience of my whole life was I did the Paris-Roubaix Sportive. I made a huge tactical error. First of all, I wasn't fit enough. That was one issue. So it's 265 kilometres in a day. And the first error was that it was 265 kilometres in a day. That was error number one. Error number two is I wore the Italian national champions jersey, which, I just got sledged for the whole 265k by Belgians and Italians for daring to wear the national champions jersey. At the time, I was very naive and young, and I didn't realise what a sacrosanct item of clothing it was.
It's been a very exciting start to the season. Sophie, in your eyes, how excited are you about 2021 after what we've been through over the past 12 months?
I think it'll be great because I think the fitness levels of World Tour riders are different. I think a lot of them, having finished so late last year, have found that they're not necessarily like next level, but their base, with the exception of maybe Peter Sagan, who's suffering from coronavirus, I should say, sorry. I think they're all sort of a lot fitter perhaps at this point of the season than they might have been in a traditional year. And I almost feel like there's been another changing of the guard again, just from what we've seen in early season races. I think the script last year was thrown out the window, and I have a feeling that might be the case again this season.
I would say, I mean, picking up what Sophie said about just the way that there seems to be this new script to racing now, that the kind of sticking to what your pulse monitor tells you and what the watts are saying that's all been thrown out the window, and everybody's just like, well, let's just go for it. Let's be gung ho. Let's all race like Julien Alaphilippe, and the emergence of Wout van Aert and Mathieu van der Poel has helped that, and now everybody seems to be going that way. So I mean, you just don't know what to expect in any race at the moment.
Oh, and that's what's exciting about it. To talk through the opening salvo of racing, which has been a very crazy opening to the year, as we probably could have guessed because 2020 was so truncated. The club chair is back. William Fotheringham has got his derriere in it. So let's hear from Foth.
I don't remember ever looking forward to a classic season as much as this one. Maybe that I'm getting older and more sentimental, but there are some sound reasons, I think. For one thing, last year's calendar was curtailed. It was out of kilter. We got a lot of thrills, but we didn't have the time-honoured structure that takes us through from Milan-San Remo to Liège-Bastogne-Liège. This spring, then, there's an urge to see that return to near normality that we're all desperate for. Although the racing will have the same background as last year, where every week felt like it could be the last. We'd see the guys competing for months. Or perhaps it's more about the personalities. More of them than I can ever remember lighting up a single spring. We've watched the Van der Poel, Van Aert and Alaphilippe show roll through Strade Bianche in Tirreno, sweeping all before them. The chances are we won't have to look much further than that trio for the plot line that underpins men's racing, with a huge range of jokers in the pack. Mads Pedersen, Greg Van Avermaet, Matteo Trentin, Tom Pidcock, and all the old lags at the Koenig Quickstep. It feels like something that harks back to when I was in short trousers and Merckx, De Vlaeminck, Martens, Godefroot and Moser were in their golden age. It's mirrored, though, by what could be a superb narrative in women's racing, although simpler. SD Walks v the rest. And it's made more interesting by the fact that the opposition, Annemiek van Vleuten, Emma Norsgaard, Lizzie Deignan, Marianne Vos, Lotte Kopecky, Grace Brown, Cecily Uttrup-Ludwig, just to name a few of them, are so strong in numbers. Pretty much every one of those races we're going to be looking at the start list, and outside SD Walks it'll be so open. There's so much strength and depth. The results will be anyone's guess. Finally, and best of all I think, we have the wild card of the women's Paris-Roubaix, starting up not after time. It simply doubles the strength of my annual prayer. Please, 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 let it rain like hell in the second week of April, rain like hell opening up, and then let the sun shine on the second Sunday.
I love the idea of A, William Fotheringham in short trousers, and B, the phrase, let it rain like hell.
Did he say all the old lags at the Koenig Quickstep?
Yeah,
Is that what he said?
Yeah.
Let's hope they're not listening.
Well, who knows who's listening? Let's know.
They're not that old, are they? Need to go back through their roster.
It sets it up beautifully. It is going to be a wonderful 2021. But let us talk about the monuments. Let us talk about the Spring Classics. Pete, you wrote a book about this. What did you call it?
The monuments.
So are we talking about the Spring Classics or are we talking about the monuments? Because I thought the Spring Classics was more than just the monuments.
Well, the Spring Classics have started with opening weekend with Omloop Het Nieuwsblad and with Kern Brussels Kern. And they basically, Spring Classics, Northern Classics with San Remo thrown in there, and I guess Strade Bianche as well now, definitely. It just kind of as a blanket phrase to cover all these one-day races at the start of the season. I mean, the monuments, there's just 5 of them. We get 4 at the start of the season, starting with Milan-San Remo, then the Tour of Flanders, Paris-Roubaix, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and then right at the tail end of the season, the Tour of Lombardy.
And there is a certain set of person, maybe a hipster, maybe somebody not wearing socks, who would say that the Spring Classics, the monuments, they're better than all of the Grand Tours. Yeah,
but I think they're just really different. They're just totally different because you have one shot. You know, you have one moment. If you miss your moment in a in a one-day race, then the race is gone. The chance of winning the title has gone. If you miss your moment in a 3-week Grand Tour, you can always regroup and try again. I mean, it depends how badly you miss it. Obviously, if you miss it by 15 or 20 minutes, then you can't. But if you miss a key break on a day and you only lose 35 seconds, we've seen that lots of times, then you can always come back and win. Perfect example of that, of course, would be Theo Gegenhardt winning the Giro last year when he was, I think, 128th or 126th in the opening time trial, and yet he still won the race. So you do that in the Spring Classic, if you're that far back in the Spring Classic in a one-day race, you're done.
People have made whole careers over winning one of the classics, haven't they?
They have. I mean, I think that's particularly easy for if you're a Belgian rider, because if you win the Tour of Flanders and you're from that part of the world, then you're made, basically. Peter van Petegem obviously did that. He won Roubaix as well. He's still kind of a legend in those parts. I mean, perhaps not the same for French riders. If you win Roubaix, it's a big thing for the French riders. If you win Flanders, maybe they're getting a bit more into it now with Alaphilippe. He's challenging for that title, and that will be quite something. I think it's now back to 1992 since Jacques Durand was their last winner, so it's been a long time since they won that race.
Sophie, what sort of rider wins the classics, wins the monuments? Because I always remember it tended to be tough riders, didn't it? It tended to be riders who could deal with 200 plus kilometres of pain.
That's sort of what I like about the Spring Classics, though, is that's not necessarily set in stone. I'm looking at like Australian winners in recent time, like Matthew Goss won Milan-San Remo, and I think he was the only person at the particular time or in the lead-in within his team and perhaps even within the peloton that thought he'd be able to do that. I remember speaking to him the night before and I said, do you think you can win? And you could hear him smiling when he said yes. So I actually that evening told everyone to put money on him because his odds were ridiculous, and they did and I didn't. So I lost.
You didn't bet on your own. You didn't bet on your own tip.
I didn't bet on my own tips, which I was like, it's just a rookie error. But then also you've got someone like Matthew Heyman won Paris-Roubaix as a 37-year-old. When again, like his Roubaix for him is something he's done his entire career. He's finessed it, and I don't think anyone necessarily, particularly when he broke a bone weeks or months before, was in there. So that's one thing I do like about the Spring Classics is they're less predictable, I think, than Grand Tours, because you've only got one shot. You can't sort of back up the next day. You have to put everything on the line physically that day and strategically and mentally. And yeah, I think it's less predictable and perhaps less planned.
You mentioned Milan-San Remo a little while ago. Jeremy, it is the longest of the monuments. It is, how many kilometres is it, 286?
It's just under 300, yeah. I mean, it varies slightly every year. I can't remember what the exact kilometres is this year because there's another route change. They have every year it seems to be slightly affected by kind of winter weather, like landslips on some of the roads overlooking the coastline as they come down into Liguria in northern Italy, and then other years there seems to be some kind of conflict with the local authority about which roads they can use and can't use. But I mean, it boils down to the kind of the headlands or the capi, that is the capes that they have to ride up and down on their way to San Remo, and then they go inland for these two crucial climbs of the Cipressa and then the Poggio. And really, it's all about where you are when you enter the bottom of the Cipressa, and then after that it's just about power. And obviously with the distance of the race, a lot of riders are stronger than others. I mean, it's quite interesting. One of the talking points this weekend at Paris-Nice was that because of the COVID lockdown in Nice, the two stages on Saturday and Sunday, the two final stages of Paris-Nice were curtailed somewhat, so they lost a little bit of their distance. And there was discussion about whether the riders in Tirreno Adriatico, where they hadn't been affected and the distances were intact, would benefit more than the guys who are riding in Paris-Nice. I think that's something that it's impossible now to tell, but maybe after San Remo there might be some kind of evidence for that.
So I think that's interesting because the riders I spoke to at select team training camps, sort of leading into Paris-Nice, they were talking about every man and his dog seemed to be at the top of a volcano, which has sort of become standard. But they were talking about that training has transitioned more into working specifically on power and then topping up with endurance. I don't know how mutually exclusive both of them are. But the riders I spoke to said there's been a clear shift in which section of training they're focusing on at this point of the season. So I wonder in a race like Paris-Nice, where it is about power, if that will make any difference.
Well, let's actually get an inside look of how a couple of team bosses are looking at the race the Italians called La Primavera. We'll have Tom Southam of EF Nippo, but first, this is Matt White of Team Bike Exchange.
I think the last 10 minutes of Milan-San Remo, very, very stressful end to what is a very long race. And what I think will happen, I think, with the talent we've got in the world of cycling at the moment, what I've seen in person here at Tirreno Adriatico is I would expect Wout van Aert, Alaphilippe, and Mathieu van der Poel, Michael Matthews, those sort of guys to be launching on the Poggio. I think the chance for the pure sprinters in the likes of Caleb Ewan, Gaviria, those type of riders, Ackerman, those type of riders to win, very slim this year. I think we've got an incredible batch of riders who are in super shape, and I can see a very, very select group of guys with those names included launching on the Poggio and staying away to the finish.
Hate to state the obvious, but I think it's going to be a pretty traditional San Remo final. Wout van Aert is obviously sprinting faster than anybody else. From those top guys with Alaphilippe and even I think Van der Poel on that kind of finish. So the onus is on those guys. I mean those two guys in particular to try and go earlier on the Poggio and crack Van Aert. But I think that's going to be super difficult for them. UAE is another team that I could see being in the mix, obviously in top form and going well. So maybe someone like Trentin around there. And then smallish group sprint, I would say, given the pressure that's going to have to come on the climb. But sprinting nonetheless.
I'm a big fan of Tom Southam's world weariness there. Before that, Matt White of Team Bike Exchange. Come on, Pete, what tip are you going to give us that you're not going to bet on, but we are going to lay our money on for Milan-San Remo?
I'm not gonna tip Philippe Gilbert to win Milan-San Remo, but I would really love Philippe Gilbert to win Milan-San Remo because he's won all four of the other monuments. If he could win Milan-San Remo, that would give him a full set of 5, which would then put him in a very exclusive club indeed, with 3 other Belgian riders, with Rick Van Looy, who was the first to achieve it, then with Eddie Merckx, and finally with Roger de Vlamingh. And it would be a fabulous achievement. I mean, in my eyes, it would be like winning all 3 Grand Tours. I mean, it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. Gilbert's been through some real difficulties in the last couple of years. He's broken his kneecap a couple of times. He's coming back from the second one of those breaks at the moment. He was at Paris-Nice, and he's got a plan. Obviously, he wouldn't tell me what it was, but he and his team have a plan for Milan-San Remo, and it would just be absolutely fabulous if he could win.
What sort of plan can you have? What is the plan?
I don't know. I mean, I guess the thing is everybody waits to the Poggio, and maybe they think that if they go a bit earlier on the Cipressa, that it might work from there. I mean, to be honest, I've kind of watching the way that Mathieu van der Poel won the 5th stage of Tirreno with his 50-odd kilometre break. I almost think that van der Poel might be thinking of attacking on the Cipressa. It almost seemed like preparation for that. Lotto said, we're planning something. You've kind of got to think outside the box. You've got to... They know that they've got all these punchy riders that they're up against. That Gilbert was once one of those riders, and he's still got a lot of punch, but... I think he's got more endurance now, and he needs to find a way to take advantage of that.
Well, I think that Tadej Pogačar has got a really good chance of winning Milan-San Remo. I'm assuming he's riding. I don't actually know that for certain, but I'm assuming he is, given the form that he's in. Because there's this spot, isn't there, just before the top of the Poggio. It's probably 1.5 kilometre from the top. It's not particularly steep, the Poggio, but it's ridden so fast. Given the power that he's demonstrated in the last week or so, and also in the UAE race where he demonstrated his climbing speeds, would you think that anybody would, if he goes as hard as he can go, say 1.5 kilometres, but there's that spot, isn't there, just towards the top of the Poggio where traditionally a lot of riders have attacked in the past and won from there, including kind of Giorgio Furlan, Laurent Fignon, Sean Kelly, I think, with Moreno Argentin as well, back in the day. If he goes at that spot with one of his, really, really super fast accelerations like he showed yesterday in Tirreno on Prato di Tivo, do you think they'll get him back?
I think they will. I don't think he's got the power to deal with Van der Poel or Van Aert. I think they're just too punchy for him. They're almost like sprinters going at that point. And I don't think. Pogacar's quick, but I don't think he's got the power to match them.
But you don't think he can, because he's fast going downhill as well, isn't he? And he's a risk taker going downhill as well. You don't think that if he gets to the top of the Poggio with like a 30-second lead, he can hold that? As well, a 20-second lead even.
If he's got a 20-second lead, he'll win. But that's almost unheard of nowadays for somebody to have that kind of gap. If he's got 10 seconds, maybe, but I think they'll bring him back. I guess the thing is that they'll all be looking to each other, to the others, to chase him down, and that's Pogacar's chance if he can get away. That they might Van Aert will look to Van der Poel, who'll look to Alaphilippe, and who'll chase. That might be Pogacar's chance.
Sorry, go on, Jeremy.
I was just going to say, Van der Poel, 4 wins in 9 days of racing so far this year. That's scary, isn't it?
Yeah. That's right. That's right on the back of the World Cyclocross Championship.
Which was brilliant. Can we have more cyclocross, please, in the Northern Sea?
That's fitness.
That's exactly what we need.
I was going to say, I don't know if I agree with Matt White saying that the sprinters won't be in the mix. It sounds like you all do, but I wonder if the more versatile sprinters. He did say Matthews, but someone like Sam Bennett, if he's got the team. When I spoke to Sam, he said he's always been dead come the Poggio. But if he's in top form, then he's confident he could get over that.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that Bennett was in the break on the penultimate stage of Paris-Nice, kind of pushing himself in quite a different way. And one of the things that De Koning was saying through Paris-Nice was that they all saw Bennett as being quite a different rider to how he was last year. That he's much more confident, having won the green jersey, having won a couple of stages at the Tour de France. That he's very sure of himself, and of course, it's just like a striker playing football. As soon as you kind of get a taste for goal, then suddenly you think you can score all the time. And I think Bennett's kind of in that kind of form at the moment. And if it does come to it, if there's a sniff of a sprint, he's going to have to be watched, definitely.
Oh, exciting. We've just had a Super Sunday of racing in Europe. Amazing racing in Tirreno, Adriatica and Paris-Nice. But yet again, Primož Roglič has fallen out of contention catastrophically at the last to lose a big race. Far from the first time this has happened. 2019 Giro, the Dauphiné in 2020, the Tour, obviously it happened on that final hill climb time trial, and now in Paris-Nice. Jeremy, what is this down to? Is it nerves, poor race management? Does he suplex mirrors for a living and kick black cats? What is he doing?
I don't know. It's odd, isn't it? One of the important things to say is that he chased really hard, chased like a demon up that final climb and then down into Levens where the finish was, and he had a dislocated shoulder apparently. So he's gutsy. You can say that about him.
Is that because he's a ski jumper, do you think?
Yeah, he's a ski jumper.
No one will ever let that go, will they?
Well, they never talk about your career as a professional water skier, do they?
No, they don't.
They don't. They should. Anyway, I don't know. It's happened a lot, hasn't it? Because the Giro in 2019, he looked it was several days from the finish, but he looked in control. Then he had the unscheduled toilet break, which led to a crash because he was chasing. He crashed twice today, and he had another 2 near misses where he nearly went down as well. So he could have gone. His bike handling skills fantastic, obviously, but he could have gone down 4 times if he'd been even more unlucky.
Well, he was following a wheel of somebody who almost went straight into a ravine. Did you see that on the chase back on?
Yeah, that was a quick step rider, wasn't it? Whose name escapes me. And
Tim de Klerk.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and then Nasser Bouhanni, he took his front wheel out, but he was chasing such a frenzy. And I don't know if the crashes. Who knows? Because we only saw one of them, and we don't know what happened with the second one. By the time he finished, it was hardly worth him wearing shorts. He was so ripped up. Yeah. But I don't know. What does everybody else think? Because I feel slightly askance in, obviously he's a really classy bike rider. He's won so many great races. He's been dominant in Grand Tours. Hasn't always finished them off. He has done with the Vuelta clearly. But there is something there, isn't there?
I mean, I was talking with a Dutch journalist at Paris-Nice about Roglic, and obviously everybody was talking about Roglic. He won 3 stages, and he looked like he was going to walk to victory on the last day. And anyway, the Dutch journalist was saying that one of the things that he'd spoken to Roglic about in the past was the fact that Roglic wants to win all these week-long stage races. So he wants to win the Dauphiné, he wants to win Paris-Nice, he wants to win Catalonia. And of course, he's already won a load of them. He's won Romandy, he's won Tour of the Basque Country. So when he goes to these races, he's kind of aiming to just add another one to his collection, basically. And when you look back at the Giro in 2019, in the lead up to that race, I think he'd raced 3 stage races and won them all, and he just ran out of juice at the Giro. I mean, he got ill and whatever, but that was probably because he was over raced. He'd been pushing himself too hard for too long, and I mean, I also heard that he wanted to ride Catalonia in a couple of weeks because he wanted to add that to his collection, which I guess if he's got a dislocated shoulder, he's not going to do. But maybe he's just kind of asking too much of himself. I mean, I think what we did see this week was that he's in superb form. George Bennett said that he was absolutely storming on a training camp just before Paris-Nice. He'd never seen him as fit. And if he can come to the Tour de France in that kind of form, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with him and Tadej Pogačar again.
It was quite interesting this afternoon as well, though, that when he was chasing, he had, I mean, obviously other than his teammates, he had few allies. And you know, there's this thing, isn't there, now because of yesterday's stage to Val d'Ormian when he caught Gino Mada basically on the line, or like 100 metres before the line, who'd been the author of this lone mountain break for the last half hour of the race. It was interesting that so many people thought it was unsporting of him to win the stage. And then this afternoon you saw the other side of that kind of no gifts mentality, that everybody just hammered home the fact that he'd had these crashes. And then we get the old discussions about, you know, is the yellow jersey, should they have waited?
I think in both
I hate
cases...
this mentality of like you should gift people stage wins. It's a bike race. And I think Roglic, like I don't know if anyone outside his own team is really going to help it, because he does have that collection that Pete was just talking about, and he is that much of a complete bike ride. I think the Tour last year, just Pogačar was sensationally better on the last day. But I just don't understand if you should have given him the win. I like, it's gut-wrenching seeing a guy that's been out there for that long, but it's a bike race at the end of the day. Yeah, someone as complete as Roger, like he still lost the race in the end, didn't he? So all that sort of counts. I almost think it's a bit arrogant to give someone a stage win when, you know, at the moment, as we've seen last season and this year, nothing's really guaranteed.
It's interesting all this, though, isn't it? Because it's like if two teammates go arm in arm across the finish line, like we saw with Carapaz and Kwiatkowski last year in the Tour, in that stage towards the end of the Tour in the final week. You know, everyone's very, isn't it sweet? They're such good friends, and look at them. They, you know, that all comes into play. So if Madej had been a teammate, it wouldn't have been in that situation anyway. But presumably then, I don't know. It's a different kind of politics, isn't it? But lots of people always say that there's this old mythology that you shouldn't make enemies in the peloton because you never know when you'll need a favour. And then it was a perfect microcosm of that debate, wasn't it? Because the next, 24 hours later, Roglic suddenly needed all the friends he could get, and he didn't have any. But I suppose it's worth bearing in mind it's a workplace, isn't it? Like anywhere else, and like any other workplace, there will be people who you get on better with than others, and there'll be mates, and even if you're riding for a different sponsor, they'll sentimentality will come into it at some times. I know. Obviously, when it comes down to kind of like certain situations, whether even if you're an ex-teammate or a best pal and you're a training partner, you'll still have to put the knife in. But there will doubtless be kind of riders who are more well liked than others, surely.
Just like journalists, Jeremy. Just like journalists.
I guess so.
I guess so. Hey, listen, I'm all for people racing every day. I think they should attack on the final day of the Tour de France on the ceremonial stage into Paris. But that's just me. Before we go, we need to talk about Richard, and Richard Freeman, to be precise, Dr. Richard Freeman. Jeremy, maybe you want to talk us through the former Team Sky and British Cycling doctor and what's been going on with his ordering of testosterone and this long, 2 years has this case been going now?
Sorry, there's a delay. That's a joke. Well, the thing about this, there's a delay to the laughter as well. There's the thing about this is that this kind of goes back, either depends how you view it. Either goes back to the Jiffy Bag scenario, the Bradley Wiggins and the Jiffy Bag, and the Department of Culture and Sport government hearings, select committee hearings in Westminster in London, when Dave Brailsford and Shane Sutton, obviously the masterminds of Team Sky and British Cycling, were grilled by a group of MPs over the exact nature of what was in the Jiffy Bag. Some people would argue it goes back even further, which would be to kind of the doubts that and the scepticism that was exhibited towards Team Sky's achievements long before that as well. But anyway, the outcome of it is that Richard Freeman, who was probably the most durable of all the team doctors that Team Sky have had over the past kind of 12, 13 years, he was found guilty of ordering testosterone by a medical tribunal, and he's now facing UK anti-doping charges and a further investigation, which may or may not reveal more about the exact truth of who the testosterone was ordered for, because we still don't know that, and further incrimination towards personnel or staff within Team Sky and British Cycling during this whole period. Obviously, it's for British fans who clapped and cheered through the numerous Olympic gold medals and then the Tour de France successes, it's uneasy reading. And I think it will go on. It will run on for a while. Dave Brailsford's keeping his counsel at the moment. He's not really talking about this at all. Ineos, his team, which is now the sponsor of basically the infrastructure and the personnel that was Team Sky, have kind of insisted that Freeman was acting alone as a doctor and that they had no knowledge of anything that was any wrongdoing, as has Shane Sutton, as has Brian Cookson, who was the president of British Cycling at the time as well. But Richard Freeman was team doctor for a long time. From everything that came out in the hearing, he was smashing laptops and losing records on an almost daily basis. At least it seemed like that when you heard all the testimony. And it's hard to understand how an organisation that made such great play of its professionalism and expertise and its preparation down to the finest of details had a doctor who was so rogue. So it is generally unnerving and worrying, and I'm sure we haven't heard the last of it.
So, cliffhanger or storm in a teacup? What are we at?
Oh, I think cliffhanger. I think Jez had the right word there, saying that it's uneasy. I'd even go a bit harder than that. For me as well, it just seems like there's been a lot of internal politics between those three key protagonists, being Sutton, Brailsford and Freeman. I'm with Jez saying I don't understand how any doctor doesn't keep precise records. And again, there was no, the reports were saying there was no direct evidence. It was just going on. There were so many ludicrous lines to this story over the years that it all started to sound like unfeasible. And I also think, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong here, but reading Shane Sutton's comments in the last week, he's started to align himself with Brailsford and all the responsibility, I guess, has been placed on Freeman. But at the beginning, I'm not entirely sure that Brailsford and Sutton were on the same page.
But Sutton definitely wasn't on the same page as Richard Freeman, not with the courtroom fireworks that were going on when he walked in and then walked out.
I think a lot of it started sort of as dirty laundry and become something a lot bigger. And I mean, I'm uneasy about it. So, when I first started covering the Tour de France, it was stock standard that every general classification rider would get asked a doping question at least 2 or 3 times in a press conference. And in recent years, that hasn't been the case. And I think this is going to open up a further case of worms.
Let's just hope it's better than the final episode of Game of Thrones.
I didn't mind. Hey, well, hang on a second. I didn't mind the final episode of Game of Thrones, but I think I'm an audience of one there. I guess the question is for you, Sophie, then you, Pete. How is this being reported? How is it being seen? What prism are they seeing it in Australia and in France? Because obviously, when it comes to the track, and this is about British cycling as much as it is about Team Sky, Great Britain and Australia have very much been at loggerheads. They've been massive rivals. How is it being reported there? Because it's not front page news here.
Well, I was going to say in mainstream press, Paris-Nice wasn't news here, but this was. the summary, the finding was. It hasn't been followed as closely throughout as British press have done very well, I might add. But it was noted. Within the industry, I'm not sure. I haven't spoken to anyone at Oz Cycling. We do have that fierce rivalry with British cycling.
I mean, in terms of France, they've always been pretty skeptical, I think, of what's going on at Team Sky. They've questioned, and I mean, when you read L'Équipe and the main French daily sports paper, they're often quite dismissive and even quite rude about Team Sky's or Ineos's achievements. And I think one of the reasons for that is that France has been at the centre of a lot of these doping cases, incidentally, because they happen to happen in France, but also that they're, I think, a lot stricter in terms of dealing with these issues in France. There are kind of legal implications if you're involved in these cases. People have been sent to prison for doping offences. And I think one of the things that fascinates me about French racing is that the kind of the iconic rider at the moment is Thibaut Pinot, who's taken such a firm and clear anti-doping stance that I mean, I really laud Pinot for that. And for me, he's a great rider. He gets a lot of stick because he doesn't win, and people question his mental fortitude. But I think a lot of the time it might come down to other factors, and maybe eventually we realise that Pinot wasn't quite as bad a rider as sometimes he's made out to be.
Oh, you assume this is bread and water is not the phrase to use here. Are you suggesting that maybe he just wasn't anywhere close to the line, this mythical line of where you can take your legal performance to?
What, Pinot?
Yeah.
Well, interestingly, he said in L'Équipe a couple of weeks ago that he's had this back problem that resulted from him crashing on the opening stage of the Tour de France last year. And he said it got so bad towards the end of last year, he had to pull out of the Vuelta, I think, after only a few days. And it got so bad that the team advised that once he stopped racing, that he had a pain-killing injection in his back to ease it. And he said he had this injection, and he said the kind of the euphoria that you felt having had it, and the immediate loss of pain, immediately made him think of what other riders might be doing, because I mean, I don't think this pain-killing injection was taking anything particularly legal, but Pinot's completely, I'm not taking anything. I'm not going to have an injection for anything. And he just sort of made him think about what people might be doing, what rivals might be up to. And I don't know. I mean, it's impossible to know what's going on, but I mean, I think as Jeremy says, it just leaves so many question marks hanging over what's happened at Team Sky and the achievements there, and again, it just clouds what's going on in the sport.
I mean, I'll tell you. I just don't want to harp on about it, but I have had an up and down relationship with Dave Brailsford over the years, a checkered relationship with him, and at times we've got on fine, and we've been. He's been quite happy to talk to me, and other times he's been reclusive and avoidant, and I've found in general, I'd say he's been happy to talk when things are going well and not so happy to talk when things are going badly. But I think he really needs to come out now and tell us as much as he possibly can or possibly is able to about this case, because he's the invisible man. You know, he was the architect of all of this success. He was the architect of the success at Team Sky and at British cycling on road and track. I mean, it's 15 to 20 years of success from the Sydney Olympics and Jason Queally through to all the Tour de France wins. He needs to, he has to be accountable for it, and he has to come out and tell us as much as he can about what was going on and what was really going on, rather than PR information about it. And also Jim Ratcliffe, who said when he came in to sponsor Team Sky, he said, we did our due diligence, and if I thought there was any cheating going on, I will walk away. Please back that up.
Well, if anybody comes out and says anything, you'll find out in the next episode of La Course on Tête. We'll be back at the same time next week. Make sure you subscribe. If you've got a review, that'd be great. And also, via our socials, you can find them either Sophie or Pete or Jeremy or myself or Peloton or indeed La Course on Tête. Let us know who you think is going to win Milan-San Remo. That is it. We are done. Thank you so much for listening. Jeremy, thank you.
Cheers. See you soon.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, AJ.
And thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, AJ.
We'll see you next time.
Da-ti-do-di-do, chi-boom, chi-boom, da-ti-do-di-do.